It's 3 o'clock. I'm going to start the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for September 3rd. And I need a motion on the approval of the order of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes of the meeting of August 6th, 2019. I need a motion to accept those minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Or any changes? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will have a brown bag luncheon on September 18th. And what this is going to exist of essentially is the development process, taking probably from when a lot is annexed, and then kind of through the developer's eyes on what to the steps to when we start seeing plots and forward. So I think everybody then will get a chance to see how something comes together as we look at, when we get parts and pieces around the peripheral of the city. We thought that would be a good exercise to, and maybe why they end up with a CUP or a PUD or something else in the process. So that will be the agenda on September 18th. Public hearing items. Moving on to item 1A. Continue the hearing on the application requesting a zoning change from MR2 multi-dwelling residential with a CO conditional overlay and an SR3 single dwelling residential to MR3. Who's got that one? Donald?
Two Jesse Craig projects going here. So, good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress, the Department of Planning and Development. Item 1A, 1B, 1C is Craig's Golden Ridge Edition. As Commissioner Gunkelman stated, this is a property here that's on 7th Avenue North and adjacent to the county drain here. There are several entitlements here. We'll take a look at them individually. As you see, this property has two zones, MR2 and SR3. The applicant proposes to rezone the entire property to MR3 as the underlying zone with a planned unit development overlay to modify certain aspects of the dimensional standards of the MR3 zone. The goal here is to build a 114-unit building that will be for a low-income tax credit project for citizens 55 years and older. So it's a rather specialized project. One point I'll note here is that this is along the drain, and so there's been considerable interaction with the Southeast Cass Water Resources District, often called the Drain Board, in working on this, as well as our City Engineers Department. It's taken a long time to get this project here and work out a reasonable compromise to the drain. So the plan to rezone with the PUD, there's a plat to plat both lots into a single lot. There is also a request to repeal an existing conditional overlay, which is on the MR2 zone lot here. That was, as explained in your packet, that was put on when that property was once developed with a church, which is now gone. And it doesn't seem that conditional overlay is necessary anymore, but we would have to formally repeal it through your and the City Commission's action to remove it. And then there's also planned unit development master plan. So we'll look at this again, this neighborhood here, Madison School here, 7th Avenue here, a number of industrial properties surrounding in this residential area here. There's some photographs here. Make it real here from this morning. This is standing on 7th Avenue. Here's the drain. You're looking generally at the property. It's a long property, as you saw on the map there. It goes from 7th Avenue all the way up here. This is a close-up of the northerly part, that is the MR2 zone part. That baseball backstop is left over from some time ago. We don't really know who owns it. And then this is facing north on 7th Avenue. There was a house here. That's been demolished. These remaining buildings will be demolished, and this would be the entrance to the property. So that's this strip here. And this is an existing residence to remain. That's not part of the project. Again, here the plat shows just one lot for all this, and then there'll be a 110-foot setback from the drain. Normally, our ordinance would require a 175-foot setback. This is something we need for drain stability. Your commission has dealt with this quite a bit in the past. This is an open drain, so they would want to have some of that area. The applicant contracted to have a geotechnical engineering firm evaluate the project site, and then our engineering department reviewed it, and working with the drain board determined that 110 feet center line setback from the center line would be sufficient. No development outside of a parking lot would be involved in that. You can't build any structures in that. So the applicant has reconfigured his project to fit into that setback. These renderings were provided by the applicant. Here again, you're looking, here's 7th Avenue down here in the drain. This is proposed, it's a U-shaped building there, as you see, with garages on the south and east sides. And this area open here is going to be mainly a park-like area. It's not going to be a formal park that's dedicated to the Fargo Park District. It's going to be a park-like area there. Again, the drain setback affects the development of that lot, so you can't really build anything there. Here again is another rendering. This would be the 7th Avenue entrance to the project site that we just looked at a couple minutes ago. Again, here's an aerial layout with some basic dimensions on it and a basic floor plan of the building here. North is to your left on this side here. So the drain is here, 7th Avenue's out here. And this is the planned unit development. As you see, there are not a lot of dramatic changes here. One thing it does is to increase the density. Normally, the MR3 zone would allow 24 dwelling units per acre. The applicant requests to increase to 30 dwelling units per acre. And that's the calculation based on how we figure that number of units divided by number of acres. Setbacks, again, not too much change here. Interior side, you need to reduce it to 5 feet. Open space, parking. Normally for an apartment building, you'd have 2.25 spaces per unit, which would require 257 units, or spaces for 114 units. The applicant proposes to reduce this to 1.4 spaces. Again, this is more of a senior living, well, it's not a care facility, but it's a senior living facility. And we went back and looked, as noted in your staff report there, at the ITE manual, the International Association of Traffic Engineers manual. They have a document, a reference document that looks at what standard parking or best practices parking is for a variety of uses. And this seemed to fit into that set of numbers that's used as a standard reference. And again, some modifications to the residential protection standards to fit the building on the lot there. And so just a few feet on the height and a little setback on the protection buffers. We'll talk about that in more detail in a minute here. This is just the same graphic you saw a few minutes ago, or without any dimensions on it here. But these garages here would have some space between them. Here's where the setback, that's actually going to be increased to 5 feet here. That setback would be in here, and that's where the residential protection buffering would be. Then here, this is 8th Avenue, so there are no residences right here. And then this lot here would be, again, the park-like area, and that provides its own buffer against the adjacent residential here. And then this is the drain with industrial across the street there. Let's not go there yet. We do note that the applicant is working through a title issue that apparently has been going on for decades. So he is resolving that. That doesn't affect your ability to recommend the plat for approval, but just so you know that's going on. That'll be resolved by the time the plat gets to the City Commission. We did have a couple of comment letters in there. They are included in your plat, and I believe we do have one person here to testify in favor of that. It's the first one, not the second. To testify regarding that matter. And also the applicant, Jesse Craig, is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. Commissioners, the staff's recommendation is in your staff report and on the screen, and that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Board, do we have any other questions for Donald?
Donald, I've got a question in regards to the intersection of 32nd Street and 8th Avenue North. I see in the southwest corner of that intersection, there's an approach that goes into the property. Is there a negative access easement along that area so that in the future they can't put an extra entrance to this property there?
Commissioners, we discussed that actually in our evaluation of this, and we don't usually put negative access easements in residential zones like this, but I believe it is the developer's intent to not have any access. That was a concern of the neighborhood. They didn't want anything coming out there.
So what would preclude him from doing it in the future if he wanted to?
That'd be part of his agreement with us, or, you know, we could add one too,
Okay.
it seems.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Melissa?
Donald, could you speak to any existing sidewalks that are on this property and if they'll be kept there?
Yes, ma'am, as we'll go to the, where's my photos here? Oh. So this is along 7th Avenue, so there's that little piece of sidewalk there. And then there is, I believe there is sidewalk along the 8th Avenue side there too. There's no internal sidewalks in the property.
But the external ones would stay.
Yeah, they're in the public right-of-way. Yes, ma'am. So they're not, the public right-of-way is not being altered by this plat.
Dawn?
There was public commentary regarding fencing,
Yes, ma'am.
and it seemed to be an important thing to some people. Has that been addressed?
The applicant can answer that a little better. He's not intending to fence the entire property, as I understand, Mr. Craig, is that right? But there was, I believe he can follow up on that comment that is included in your packet of how that's going to be dealt with in his project design.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd like to invite the applicant up to the podium.
Hello. Jesse Craig, Craig Development. Ms. Morgan, to answer your question, we did have quite a few different conversations with different neighbors in regards to the fence. Most of them, or quite a few of them, I can't say an exact number, but wanted to keep the chain link fence that is a perimeter right now fence that goes around the entire property. We'd probably remove it along the drain side. We're trying to accommodate everyone as we possibly can. I don't want to have 20 different fences at varying heights and colors necessarily. I have to understand too, this is a 4% low-income housing project. It's not a 9%. So with the 4%, we've had probably about 7 different layers of programs that we've had to put into place to actually make this thing viable. And we're still at only a 1.15 debt service coverage versus a 1.2. So anywhere from the PACE program to the home funds to the HIF program, we've gotten assistance from state and city levels, and still it's going to be a tight one to build. We ran into some difficulty with the drain setback. We did soil testing. We said we could put it within 75 feet of the drain, but they weren't comfortable with that, so we had to push it back a little further. That's when the PUD kind of came into play. Otherwise, I think we would have had enough setback from the lot lines and things to accommodate everything. I guess, you know, it's one of those situations where you try to cut as much cost as you possibly can on everything, but you want to end up with a good product that somebody will want to live in, and it'll still be looking presentable in 30 years. So that's where we're kind of stuck at right now. This project would be applied for the pilot program from the city and the state, or the county, I'm sorry, level. We need that to make this work also. So willing to answer any questions you have?
I would assume the most important fence is the one along the drainage ditch, and that would have been part of the agreement you would have already made.
The fence did not come into that agreement. Actually, for the, I think there is a fence, isn't there, along there? So there's a chain link that goes along there.
We'll go
but
back to that picture.
It hasn't been part of the agreement that I saw.
Yeah, there is an existing chain link fence right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about those wandering seniors heading for that ditch.
Yeah, it's Yeah, hopefully we won't have wandering seniors, I guess that'd be the first thing. They're only 55 and I'm 50 this year, so.
Well, you're nearly a senior.
Ankle bracelets.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Jesse, one question on the north end of the property, would there probably be a fence where it butts up to the residential area? The two of the sides you've got pretty well covered with garages.
Yeah, we actually moved them around. We did have them on the north side, and then the neighbors kind of did not care to have the garages to look at. I don't think they really want a fence either. We kind of talked about it, and we're more looking at bushes and shrubs and trees and things of that nature, so it's more natural, rather than just a real, I don't know, it just seems to be more tight of a site like that, to just, you know, rather than box it in.
Any other questions?
I got a question for Donald. Refresh my memory, I believe the last city commission meeting, Mayor Mahoney was talking about 55 and older affordable housing and that they've been filling up quite fast. Is that,
Ma'am, I'll tell you what, I was not at that meeting. I think maybe our planning director would be able to answer that question better.
Well, it's below 1% in the city right now. This project actually came about because Mayor Mahoney challenged me to make something like this work. 4% aren't predominant. You don't see them very often just because it takes so much to make them work. And then Commissioner Pipcorn seconded that challenge to me, so that's kind of why this came about. But, you know, talking to Metro Plains, Fargo Housing Authority and things like that, there is a big need for it. Lynn Funding's Land's one of my consultants on this. You guys all know Lynn. You know, he's the one who's talking about, you know, this barrage of elderly people that are going to be coming into the system that need affordable housing to live in. And right now, you know, there's 3,000 people on a waiting list, not just 55 and older, but overall. And, you know, I went down to the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency, you know, annual meeting, and they asked for $30 million for a 2-year window, and they got 7.5, and they had to beg for $7.5 million. And I just don't know, you know, even with like a 4%, we can build 114 units hopefully, but typically over a 2-year period, they're building, you know, barely building, you know, 200 units. And we're just getting further and further behind as a state and especially as a county, so.
thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Craig? Okay, I'd like to open up for the public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment either for or against this? Please come to the podium.
Hello, I'm Luke Lubon. I live at 3102 8th Avenue North, which would be right on the corner. My property butts up to the back of this, and my main concern is privacy, building a 3-story building right in my backyard. You know, when Craig Properties showed us, you know, we had a neighborhood meeting and showed us some renderings. You know, there was a football field between the street and the building on all the pictures they showed us. And then you can see from here, you know, there's gonna be 5 feet between my fence and the back of the garage. And, you know, I'm just concerned about, you know, where the garbage is gonna blow and collect behind the garages and where they're gonna push snow to. And, you know, people watching my backyard. You know, every house in our neighborhood is a 1-story house, and, you know, if they're living in an apartment, they're probably not gonna come over and meet all the neighbors and be, be as accountable as the rest of us are to each other, things like that. I do like that the property is being developed. I would just like to see something a little shorter.
Any questions for this gentleman? All right, thank you.
Oh, one more thing.
Yep.
You know, traffic on 7th Avenue is pretty busy, but I use it all the time. I appreciate that it doesn't have stoplights all the way up and down it, like a lot of other roads in this town. So you can use it to travel east and west. But, you know, the increased traffic is a concern. And if they ever did put another entrance on 8th Avenue, I would be really disappointed.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
yep.
Anyone else from the audience wish to speak? Okay, I'll close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act?
Just one more question. Donald, are these all apartments? Or are some condos or?
I believe they're all rental units, ma'am. Is that correct, Mr. Craig? Yes, they're all rental units.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion from anyone?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendation of staff.
Is there a second?
Can I make a comment before there's a second? Is there some way, I just am a little bit hesitant about making this motion and leaving that approach that possibly could be used to access this site to the north. I think we need something in the motion that says that the only entrance is the one on 7th Avenue.
You can add that to the motion, sir, and that'd just be a modified
If
motion.
you don't mind doing that,
Do you want to add it to the motion?
I would appreciate it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
No, go.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that,
Don, can we add that to your motion?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so the only access to the property is off of 7th Avenue.
Or to add a negative access easement to the 8th Avenue sides.
yes. And I'll second the motion.
Okay, and the motion is moved and seconded. Let's see, any further discussion? Call for a roll call vote.
Tassa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Lockmeyer,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Sobolik. Aye. Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 2.
Good afternoon. I'm pinch hitting for Aaron Nelson. He's ill today, so bear with me. Item 2A and 2B is titled Craig's Oak Grove Second Edition, and it's located at 505, 509, 515 Oak Street and 2, 6, and 10 6th Street North. Jesse Craig with LHS Investment is the applicant, and he's present today. The request is for a minor subdivision. It's a replat of Lot 1, Block 1, Craig's Oak Grove addition. In addition, 2B is a zoning map amendment from DMU downtown mixed use and MR2 with a PUD to DMU and MR2 removing the PUD. Kind of going through the site, in essence, LHS Investments was able to acquire a couple more lots since their last plat, and they've been working on a master plan. The property, you've seen the property since about 2017 with a few different renderings. With this plat, the proposal is an apartment building on the interior side where the DMU zoning is, and townhomes on the exterior where the MR2 would be. And hopefully I can try explaining sort of what's going on here. In essence, the plat and the zoning change sort of clean up the area. This area that's in purple has been zoned DMU since 2003. And then the area all here is zoned MR2. The plat line actually follows this line here and requests to rezone this area from MR2 to DMU. So this is the proposal as it currently stands. North is to the left of this, and you can see his existing layout, how the building sort of encroaches where the MR2 is, and the requested DMU. However, the majority of the parking lot associated with the apartment is also being rezoned from MR2 to DMU. This helps clean up zoning database a little bit too, because the parking lot could certainly remain MR2. However, it gets to be dual zoned in one lot, and it gets to be really challenging to keep track of. We have received comments on the property. There are two, you have two letters in front of you. There was a neighborhood meeting August 27th. Some of the concerns, it was attended by 10 neighbors. Some of the concerns were regarding the increased density, the vehicular parking, the vehicular circulation, and some concern about aesthetics. I just kind of want to clarify that this is the existing zoning today, and the purple area is DMU, downtown mixed use, which would allow an apartment building by right. Downtown mixed use doesn't have any setback requirements, and it doesn't have any height requirements. So trying to be able to paint the picture exactly what's going on here. That being said, the planning department's recommending approval, and I'm certainly available for any questions.
One question real quick. What showed as Lot 1 is already zoned for the townhouses,
Correct.
so
That MR2 zoning is remaining.
Commissioners, any questions for staff? See no questions. I'd like to invite Jesse back to the podium. Any questions for the applicant?
So this zoning change actually was brought about by city staff. Not to blame them or anything, but like Mark said, it does clean up the zoning so that the zoning matches the plat. That's kind of what we're doing here. Like Mark said, there's really, with the DMU zoning, there's also no limit on parking. There's no parking requirement. So that's what we're trying to do here. Is one of the biggest concerns of the neighborhood was that we had off-street parking for guests and overflow for tenants. So that's why we looked at putting that parking lot on the site. If you notice, if you can see in that one view, we're not using 100% of the lot, even though DMU allows us to. So we are trying to maintain some green space, maintain trees, set back away from the dike, things like that. I think one of the things that has been brought up in the several neighborhood meetings that I've had with this project is that the lot that was zoned DMU really wasn't functional. It wasn't able to be built on unless the levee would have been constructed. There had to be flood protection. That's $300,000 that have spent or will spend on platting it, designing it with engineering, soil testing, things of that nature. It has to, be FEMA certified with compaction, all of that stuff. So that was one of the things why this constituted putting an apartment complex on it. I've had several people ask me, why don't I put townhomes on it? Well, you look at the cost of the land, another $300,000 to do the levee design and build it, and then you have another probably $300,000 for the soil remediation because it's literally 14 feet of rubble underneath that site. And you can't afford to do those, they just can't cover the cost. I did ask the city if they would finish the levee for me. They would not, so that's why I moved forward with doing it all myself, so. Any questions?
Any questions?
How many stories is the apartment building?
It's 4 stories, so there's one main level of parking. So there's one lower below grade level of parking, one main level of parking, and then 4 floors above it.
And then do I see 2 entrances?
For the parking or for the parking garage, yes, there'll be one main level entrance and then one lower level entrance. And we have changed the idea of this now to, we take the top floor of it. It was gonna be 121 apartment units, and now we're gonna do 24 condo units on the top floor to sell, and then 92 apartment units below it. And then there'll still be 11 to 14 townhomes that'll be on 6th Avenue North and Oak Street that'll also be rented, with the idea in the future to sell those also. Because again, one of the big concerns for the neighborhood was getting families into the area.
So right now, the plan is for the townhomes to be all rental units with a plan in the future for them to be sold.
Correct. We'll construct them and meter them so that we can sell them in the future.
Mike?
How are you addressing the flood protection on the east side of this lot 2?
The east side, that will actually, there's a levee that's constructed along there, and then we'll connect onto that levee and bring that all the way around to Oak Street.
Okay.
When it hits Oak Street, it'll be about 6 inches high because of the elevation, but we'll have to tie into the existing levee.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, commissioners, for the applicant? All right, thank you, Jesse. I'd like to open up the public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this project? Either for or against? See nobody, I'll even close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act?
I'd like to make a comment. I am hoping that once we get the core neighborhood plan in place, that it's going to be easier for everyone, including planning staff, developers, and residents. This has been a project that's been under scrutiny for a long time, and I have to applaud the tenacity of Jesse Craig for hanging in there. I know there have been several public meetings, and there are a few residents that have been in opposition primarily because of the traffic in the neighborhood. But it seems like everything has been covered in terms of what can possibly be done to make this a good project. So hoping going forward that this is going to be easier rather than more difficult.
Thank you. We have a motion. Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Kunkelman,
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda. Hearing on the application of requesting a zoning change from SR2, single-family dwelling residential, to SR3, Timber Creek 3rd Edition.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress again from the Planning Department. Timber Creek 3rd Edition is 47th Avenue South here, 34th Street, I-29. These properties here are currently zoned SR2. What the key to this whole discussion here is what's allowed in each zone. So in the SR2 zone, the biggest thing, you might say, is a detached single-family residence. In the SR3 zone, which is the zone is proposed to be rezoned to, you can build a duplex, which is 2 units in one building on one lot. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Again, here's the location. Here are 7 undeveloped lots, either subject properties. These 2 houses are here, and there's one more here now, I think. And your commission might recall last year, I believe, there was some replatting and rezoning of these on the end for you commissioners who were here. There was an earlier proposal to split these lots, to subdivide them. That was withdrawn. It never went forward. I don't think it ever made it to your commission. And so this is just a different applicant now, Mr. Dabbert, as opposed to Mr. Volmuth, looking at doing this here. So again, what you want to Here's what that property looks like on the ground. Here we're looking westward. This little corner here is the little corner of this house, so we're looking this way. And just seeing the open space here, and then across the street are some smaller residences here. Now we're looking the other direction. So the subject property is over here. We're looking east. And again, here's a, you might say, a little close-up of these different kinds of homes here. And just to illustrate this to you, this gets to be a complicated thing in some minds. So the subject properties are all SR2, and they're all 80 feet wide. Like these houses are built on an 80-foot wide lot. Across the street, the zoning is different. It's smaller, it's SR4. It's smaller than what the applicant is proposing, so it's not the same. But as you see, these lots here are all 40 feet wide, so they're half this width. And each one has a single-family home on it. It's its own house on its own lot, all by itself. There's a little setback in there. These lots down here are twin homes. These lots are also 40 feet wide. Each side of the twin home is on its own lot, but there's a lot line down the middle. So that's what makes it a twin home. It's a 2-unit townhouse, basically. But that's what makes it a twin home. These lots and these lots are the same size, and they each have one residence on it. But here, the residences, they connect, the building crosses the lot lines. What the applicant proposes to build is, have the option to build at least, is, I'll give you an example, something that would look like this or like that from the front, which is 2 units in one building, but it's all on the same lot. Now here's the thing, if you look at this from the front, you can't tell if it's a twin home or a townhouse, because you can't see where the lot line is. If this were a twin home, the lot line would go down the middle. Duplex allows you to build it on one lot. So the result of that is potentially there could be 2, if the applicant did build all these to the full capacity. Instead of having 7 residences here, there would be 14 of them. There's still 7 buildings, but each one is a 2-unit building. So you would have an increase in density there potentially of having 2 residential units on every lot. So that is the key to the difference between the SR2 and the SR3 that has been proposed. These are included. This is not in your packet. I just put this together earlier this afternoon for your reference. These are 2 models that Mr. Dabbert uses that are named the Roberta and the Sarah models here. Again, just look at how they look on the lot and how they might look from the front. Your commission is not approving any specific designs, but we asked to be provided with some idea of how these might look for your reference on the lot. So we do have, I know there's at least one person here to testify, and we do have a statement that I'll read for a testifier who cannot be here. We did just talk to him on the phone, the director and I. So we're going to read a shortened statement. You received this morning by email, and then also you got the same information as a laid-out item prior to the Planning Commission hearing start this afternoon of 2 documents. One was a 1-page letter from one of the residents, and another was a rather more extensive analysis provided by Mr. Bring. And just for reference, he lives a little bit off, a little bit down from these properties here. So he's not adjacent, but he's nearby these properties. So again, we'll have some testimony. Don Dabbert, who is the applicant, is with us this afternoon, and may also wish to address the commission. That concludes our presentation until I come back to read the statement here as part of the testimony. Thank you, commissioners.
Any questions for staff? Mike?
Donald, so if twin home, townhouses, whatever, so they build a 2-unit structure on the lot, are both units owned by one person then?
Well, they could be done a couple different ways. They could be both rental units. You could buy one and rent the other side to somebody else. I suppose if 2 of us want to buy it, if 2 owners wanted to buy it, they could create a 2-person condo association. Mr. Dabbert can probably address what he has in mind. He had mentioned in earlier discussion of it would also facilitate something that having a mother-in-law unit there. I'll let him go into that in a little more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa?
Donald, we've got a big packet of opposition here. Has the opposition met the certain requirement that would force a supermajority vote?
That is actually taken at the city commission, ma'am. So we haven't evaluated for the purpose of this meeting because that would come up at the city commission. And yes, okay, that's the answer to that. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
See no other questions.
Commissioner, may I just add one more thing? As you look at that rather extensive testimony, you'll see that the applicant has not really had any, or the residents haven't had a chance to have any interaction with the applicant this time. And as mentioned in Mr. Bring's documentation there, we would think you may consider a continuance of this matter as you're evaluating it here this afternoon, a continuance of this matter to the October Planning Commission meeting if you think further contact with the neighborhood is warranted and further time is necessary for the neighborhood residents to meet with the developer and evaluate how this is actually going to be executed, what, if there are any modifications or compromise or what exactly the developer has in mind, because I know that that has not had a chance to happen yet.
All right. I'd like to ask the applicant if he'd like to come to the podium.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Don Dabbert. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to present this today. As Donald laid out, just a couple points of clarification. So these would be one owner, one structure. And it's not a plan that all these would be built. What we've seen and we've been able to do in other communities, which isn't as with the current zoning in Fargo, able to do affectionately known as a mother-in-law suite, a son-in-law suite, anything like that. This essentially would be two dwelling units that would be under the same roof. They'll have one water service, they'll have one sewer service. It'll be one lot, one address, and maybe 3457 unit A and a unit B or something like that. So what we're finding is there's and I think it was addressed earlier with Mr. Craig's presentation, that there's a shortage of other housing that is kind of that in between when there are some people ready to move out of their primary residence at a certain age, and there isn't something that's maybe they're ready to go quite into a large building. And the affordability factor. So, like I said, we've done probably a dozen units where we've been able to have it where they can still have some privacy, have their separate entrance, and to do that. And so that would really be accommodated into this. This is an example of it, just not necessarily even the unit type or anything else. These have stairs, but some of the other stuff would be a slab on grade. It could be a different entrance altogether. But in order to be able to be permitted to have two units, we would require it just to go from an SR2 to an SR3. Important thing too to point out, with it not having as a separate unit, if you've in your planning books you've read about accessory dwelling units that are very popular around the rest of the country or anything else, we're not proposing any other detached buildings or anything. I need to stress that this is still just would give us the ability to test the marketplace to see what it'd be like to, even if we wanted to be able to, if the market would accept us. So, and the reason why we're kind of going a bookend to bookend, not permissible or encouraged to rezone just one lot as a postage stamp. So we're going to have this. This would still, if it ends up being an SR3 zoning is approved, that wouldn't prohibit us from still building single-family detaches. And for the most part, all of these units would end up being built would look by and large like a single family detached unit. You're not going to see where it's going to be, an apartment building, et cetera, anything like that. Prior to this, so I own some of the lots as well as the developer. Going on about 5 birthdays now worth of these lots getting older, and so we've tried to come up with some different ideas as to how we could do that. It just wasn't feasible to be able to do any other lot splits like what Paces was going to apply for before, due to the fact the amount of the infrastructure that's there, storm sewers, utilities, everything else. This would be building on the existing lot lines, no street lights, no fire hydrants need to be moved. no services, anything else. It's a matter of just a rezone.
Any questions from Mr. Dabbert? Anyone?
I have a question. With your reference to the grandmother house or something similar with it being one address and utilities being one, would this be encouraging extended families to live together?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be one address, one water, one service, but it actually could be set up where we'd have its own electric or gas utility without having to run. You know, we haven't got that far down the path, but this is exactly about extending families. So when I say this is an accessory or an additional unit, it could be for someone who's older or someone who's younger than the primary, but it will be one owner. It wouldn't be allowed to be split down the middle like a twin home will be, where those are two separate owners that have a party wall agreement and everything else. So this really fits into a whole different classification for construction as well as zoning.
That seems to be trending too in terms of social relationships, that many times parents will move to be closer to their children and their grandchildren, and that they aid in some of the care for the children. That sort of thing seems to be becoming more popular. And so this seems to be playing into an arrangement where there is greater extension of family relationships.
Well, it's whether it's a grandma suite or a nanny suite or a son-in-law suite or anything like that. What we're seeing is just that very trend. And after completing my service on the Special Assessment Task Force, the affordability factor and the obtainable housing right now is at the separation of that gap is widening every single day. And so the barrier to entry for home ownership is why you've seen the rental market be where it's at, but also the cost to get there. This, for not necessarily some good reasons, but Timber Creek by and large has been an example of what can go wrong when pricings get out of hand. So the infrastructure and everything was put in not as an over design, but at the peak of a lot of other competition going on. And so by today's standards, we would say that those costs were not as favorable as they would be as what we're seeing today, for example, because of the amount of other work going on. So it's a matter of how do we regulate some of those costs that we have to deal with and still make it consistent with the neighborhood. So the price point with really for what's going to be going in there to address some of the concern of the neighborhood, the starting price point will still, in all intents and purposes, be at or greater than any of the existing surrounding homes that are there, because we're essentially twice the size. But even that aside, if we took it by half, it's still going to be, each unit would still be at or more expensive than the existing neighborhood within that earshot range of it.
Any other questions?
I have one more question, Mr. Dabbert. I was noticing the two single-family dwellings that are on that side of are bordering you both on the east and on the west. How do you envision the yards in relationship to the houses that are there? I mean, what do you foresee, like, for side yards and things like that?
We'd actually be keeping comparable side yards. So I don't even, with this going, without going to SR4, for example, where the side yards get smaller, side yards would be very comparable to what they'd be there as the existing structures, I would envision. And again, we're not proposing more, well, I guess by virtue it would be more density, but essentially it would still look like a larger single-family home.
Okay, thank you.
If I address that question for you.
That's good. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, I'd like to open it up to the public for comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Rod. I'm co-owner of Archer Real Estate Services and Archer Investment and Management here in Fargo. I also live in Fox Run, which is in that on 46th Avenue South on the other side of the green space of where this property is being considered. I've been in close communications with Matthew Bring, who is on the house on the intersection of 47th and 34th, right there. Yep, that's his house that he just bought. He's in Omaha. He's a federal judge, I believe. And he's greatly concerned about his property value and asked me about that. And I said, and this goes back to this spring when this was proposed to you before. Slightly different version this time, but it's still the same thing. It's an increase in density. This is twin homes. However, how pretty you make them look. They're twin homes that definitely could be rentals. I don't know, even if you have the sewer, water, utilities all under one address, there's nothing stopping you from what I see of renting them the sides out. When this was brought before us before this spring, they were also looking on 34th Street south of his place there. They were also talking about doing that one. And I believe on the other side of the walk path on 47th, to the right of the east of where that other one is. I believe those 5 lots too. So there's been 3 different proposals of changing the zoning here, all increasing the density. I've lived in Fargo 12 years now at the same location in that area. I remember when this whole development was brought to the public, we had gymnasium meetings at one of the schools, plumb full with concerned people. They lowered the amount of apartment buildings. They put the row of duplexes and a nice row of single-family dwellings. That was a compromise that everybody made. The developers, the people who live there that was affecting. This is no more than when Mr. Dabbert brought it up, they're overpriced in the neighborhood. Specials are too high, lots are too high priced. Not really as homeowners our problem. Lower the price, sell them as single families, what you promised. We are looking at a slowdown in Fargo in new construction of single-family homes. So that's a trend. We have to work with trends. I like his idea. It looks like a nice-looking place, but there's no guarantee that you're not going to just put up a twin home and then come back next month and split the property line so that you can sell one half to one person, one half to the other person, and come back next month and do the same thing on those other 2 lots because you still haven't sold single-family homes. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just a citizen that lives in the neighborhood, and it looks like an increase in density of something that was negotiated and just hasn't worked out for them. I don't know why we have to take the brunt of it and have more rentals, which was all negotiated and changed. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. No questions. Anybody else from the audience wish to speak either for or against this project? Please introduce yourself. Thank you.
I'm Mike Rollum. I don't live in the neighborhood, but I think this is a really cool experiment, and I think you should give it a try. That's it.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I do have a statement to read here as well.
Okay.
The other comment that I forgot to mention was the fact that when this came up and they withdrew it, there was 17 oppositions to it, and I don't believe any of them have changed their mind, and they were told when they withdrew it last time to talk to the community, find out what they want. There has been no effort of any. This is the first we're seeing of it. The letter we all got that live within 300 feet of this was dated August 16th. We received it the 18th, 19th, 20th. That's less than 2 weeks ago. So it was really new for us to know anything about this, and the comments for the last 2 days have been crazy for Mr. Bring and myself of trying to find out what's going on. If nothing else, we'd love to see a delay so that Mr. Dabbert can bring it to the public and bring it to us. It's a nice looking home. Show it to everybody. Let the neighborhood see it. They're going to be the ones that are going to welcome you or shun you. Thank you.
Donald.
Mr. Roth, thank you. He referred to Mr. Bring, who lives in the neighborhood there. He is the gentleman who wrote the rather extensive document that you provided. He is not able to be here to testify, but after discussion with him today, he did send an email of a shortened statement that we said we'd read into the record for him. So again, this is Mr. Bring talking. I'm just reading it here. To the members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to allow a statement to be read into the record. I am currently working in Omaha and am unable to attend the meeting in person. I previously contacted Mr. Kress to request this matter be continued for a month to allow the neighborhood to better prepare a response. This matter was scheduled immediately after the holiday weekend, not unlike prior proposals scheduled immediately after New Year's Day. Being out of town, I only became aware of it when a concerned resident contacted me last week. I also note that the developer has not reached out to me or anyone else in the neighborhood, and my attempts to contact Mr. Dabbert have gone unreturned. Moreover, the applicant was granted at least 2 continuances in the past regarding such matters. It is only equitable to extend the same courtesy to people actually living in the neighborhood. In the event you move forward, I note that I have written a lengthy protest petition in opposition to the proposed changes in Timber Creek 3rd Edition. As of this afternoon, it was not yet added to the online materials, although I was assured by members of the Planning Department that it has been passed along to you. That is the items you received this morning and then as laid out items this afternoon. While many were written with respect to a prior proposal, the fact remains, I trust that each of you will read through not only my arguments, but the responses of the nearby residents. While many were written with respect to a prior proposal, the fact remains that the currently proposed changes are substantially similar to those proposed earlier this year, but ultimately withdrawn by the developer. The current proposal is in fact more onerous to the local neighborhood, as it would change these 7 lots to allow 14 homes rather than the 9 homes previously sought. As an attorney and judge, I focus much of my petition on the legality of the changes sought and will not rehash them in great detail at this time. In sum, many of the required factors simply have not been met by the applicant, including their need to demonstrate that the proposed changes will not negatively affect nearby property values. It is simply not credible for either the applicant or the city planning department to assert that changing these lots into duplexes will not affect nearby property values. Whether the strict letter of the law has been applied in the past does not change the fact that the plain language of the law governs these matters, and the requirements of the law itself have not been met. In speaking with the affected residents earlier this year, many expressed their dismay at the never-ending series of changes sought by the same developer in the Timber Creek area. They have, on more than one occasion, assured the public that they only need one more change, only to come back and ask for more. People in the neighborhood, myself included, have purchased homes based on an understanding of what the neighborhood would be, only to have it changed later on. In essence, they have repeatedly gained approval for their projects based on certain assurances, only to go back on such promises later on. Many residents also expressed their concern at the fact that much of this section of 47th Avenue has become rental properties, which prevents people from building relationships to their neighbors. The fact that the stated goal of this project is to build duplexes with only many such an issue will only make such an issue worse, only make such an issue worse. If you wish to destroy any chance of Timber Creek being any more than rental properties, this would be a great way to do so. Quite simply, local residents need certainty in order to make informed decisions. To allow a developer to repeatedly change the rules in their favor serves the developer well, but not the public. Please give specific consideration to the statements of more than 15 residents earlier this year and say enough is enough to this developer. Matthew Bring. That concludes the statement from Mr. Bring.
All right. Any other further comment from the public? Maybe one question for Eric would be, is there any legal issues that were brought up in this that we're not following, or the planning department has not?
Your zoning decision is based on the factors laid out in the land development code and the staff report. I think there are 4 of them, and the staff report addresses the factual basis for each of the 4 factors. And if you were to adopt the findings of the staff, then you've addressed those 4 factors, and that's legally sufficient.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, any other questions for Donald?
The gentleman that spoke earlier mentioned that other proposals had been brought up along 34th Street and then just, I don't know if we're looking northeast of the walkway on 47th Avenue. I'm newer to the commission. Does anybody recall any discussion on these or what happened with them?
Commissioner, what these were, there were 2 here. I'm not familiar with this one. I don't work on this one. But there was a proposal here to divide these lots in half and rezone them. And then there was a proposal here originally to divide these lots in half, and then it was cut down to split 7 lots into 9, making them somewhat smaller. That was referred to in the statement there. They were ultimately withdrawn. This would have been, well, I'd have to look on that. I think it was the spring of this year. I think if Mr. Bring refers to one of these being right after New Year's. I have a lot of cases in my head, ma'am. I don't remember exactly when that was. But it was this winter and spring, and they were ultimately withdrawn, so no action was taken on them. I'm not even sure that your commission even discussed them.
I don't think so.
I have a question for Donald. There was reference in the letter to the number of rentals in the neighborhood. Do you have any idea how many rentals there are?
No, I do not, ma'am.
Anybody in planning? Okay. Another question for Eric. These are intended, I assume, for sale, not for rental.
Yes, these would be for sale units. Conceivably, if to what has been proposed or alleged, other side, it could be rented out. I guess if you were going to charge a family member or whatever else, but it could reasonably be a non-related person living next door.
So it would be similar to someone buying a duplex then? They could live in it, but they could also rent out the other part?
It would be exactly like that. That's what these would be proposed. The zoning change would allow us. Again, I'm not, for the record, I want to make it very clear, we're not here representing, we're going to go put in 7 buildings of 14 units worth of duplexes, but we are not even under the current zoning able to even design and promote the fact of a mother-in-law suite or a son-in-law suite or anything else with having 2 separate types of entrances with the way it's zoning right now.
So whomever lived in the second part would be dependent upon the owner of the building?
Very much so, yeah, and which I think, you know, while as selfishly as a home builder, I would love everyone to own their own home. It's just more business for us, but the reality is that some people, for one reason or another, either economic or social reasons, don't own their own home. And to somehow say that those renters are somewhat they're problematic or not relational or not neighborly, I think is a misstatement and a broad, unjust categorization of them.
I've made comment before about how when I was younger, one of the goals was to buy a duplex so that you could be purchasing a home and at the same time have some income to support that purchase. So this seems to fit within that ideal in a sense.
If someone were to buy it, and it's exactly it, if it wasn't for a family member, they could be living in one side and renting the other side out while, you know, being the landlord next door. I would think it'd be a pretty tight rope on the tenant next door.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Donald, has there been any kind of a neighborhood meeting on this?
I am not aware that there has been. When Mr. Dabbert applied, I believe Mr. Williams and I both advised him that there had been some controversy in the past and forwarded earlier comments from the neighbors that we had gotten, again, including from Mr. Bring. So he was aware that there had been neighborhood opposition to the previous projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act? Do I have a motion?
I would move to continue and allow more communication between the developer and the neighborhood. Obviously, whatever happens here seems to have implications for the other lots in the neighborhood, so we want to do it right.
Okay, there's a motion to continue. Is there a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote.
Schneider?
Aye.
Sobelik?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Migelke?
Aye.
Tasa?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Kunkelman?
Aye, motion carries.
Commissioners, would that be to continue to the October Planning Commission meeting? Yes, sir, thank you.
Is that time to get a neighborhood meeting together?
Slightly less than 30 days from today. So, well, we can schedule it for that and work with Mr. Dabbert and the residents there.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back. Commissioners, let's.
Need a gavel.
Please be seated, Rocky. All right, moving on to item number 4, zoning change from LC Limited Commercial to LI Limited Industrial, Agassi Nursery Addition. Luke.
Hey, good afternoon. This is the Agassi Nursery Addition for PKG Contracting. It's located at 4203 University Drive South, and the owner and applicant is PKG Contracting. The applicant is seeking a zoning change from LC Limited Commercial to LI Limited Industrial. The subject property has the same owner as the adjacent lot to the south, 4301 University Drive South, and is used by the same business, PKG Contracting. You can see in the aerial photo, it's kind of unified between the two lots, the same owner. And you could see by the ground view that it's just the same use, same company. This zone change purpose is to just better match the existing use to more suitable zone. We have received no inquiries in regards to the application, and staff is recommending approval as outlined in the staff report. That concludes staff's presentation.
Any questions for Luke? All right, I invite the applicant to speak. If there are any questions for the applicant, anybody?
Good afternoon, hi John. Hi. Good afternoon, my name is Darren Fingston. I'm the owner of PKG Contracting, so I really don't have any comments unless you have some questions. I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions, anybody? All right, I'll make this easy for you. All right, I'll open it to the public for comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment either for or against? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act?
I move to approve the motion in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Migelke?
Aye.
Sobelik?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Tasa?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Kunkelman?
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, zoning change from SR3, single dwelling residential, to PI, Agassi Nursery Addition.
Right, so this is Agassi Nursery Addition for City of Fargo. So, this is adjacent to the previous item, but it's an unrelated zone change. The location is 1421 42nd Avenue South. The owner and applicant is City of Fargo. This is a zoning change from SR3, single dwelling residential, to PI, public and institutional. single-family house used to be on the subject property, but was removed in about 2017 to place a flood control levee, which was built through the subject property soon after the removal. And this zone change's purpose is to better match the existing use to a more suitable zone. As you can see in the aerial photo, there's the levee cutting through the site, and then another ground view of the levee itself. So we haven't received any inquiries in regards to this application, and staff is recommending approval on this application as outlined in the staff report.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll move on to public comment. Anybody from the public either for or against this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional discussion, or do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I would move to approve as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on it? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
McGilkey?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Sobolik?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Tasa?
Aye.
Kunkelman?
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 6. The application for an alley vacation on block 21, Keenly and Divot, whatever, second edition. Broadway downtown.
It's from the 1800s, sir.
Yeah, okay.
It's an old one.
Little
Good
Irish.
afternoon again, Commissioners. This is, in a way, part 2 of something you did last month. We'll go to the aerial photo here. You'll recognize this is as we know, the former Goodyear building. There's been the farmer's market out here up until recently, up until, just later this summer. It's now moved over to First Avenue. Last month, you had a vacation of 21.5 feet of street right-of-way that you recommended for approval. That's on its way to the City Commission here. Same applicant, Kilbourne, is requesting vacation of this alley. It's all for part of a larger project to be known as the Mercantile. Again, as I understand, a parking ramp with surrounding residential and retail. Fairly straightforward here. Alley vacations aren't overly exciting generally. Here's looking south along the alley. My back is to the steel fence back there. Behind me is Great Northern Cycles. And then here on this photo, standing on the other end, looking north, and here's the entrance from 4th Avenue North. This is the Goodyear building, and the Goodyear building with the octopus on it there. Again, Great Northern Cycles. Again, just a straightforward vacation. They need to do this to be able to construct that project. Here's the vacation plat, prepared by Houston Engineering, showing the vacated alley on there. And again, staff's recommendation is stated in your staff report shown on the screen. The project representative, Mr. Keith Lear from Kilbourne, is with us this afternoon if you have any questions for him. We have not received any protests. We did get a couple questions on what vacation meant and how that affected surrounding properties, but these people were not adjacent owners. They just wanted to see if their property would be affected by this, and they are not. Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioners, any question for staff? See no questions. Invite the applicant to speak if need be. Any questions, Commissioners? All right, I'll open it for the public comment. Anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this project? Seeing none, I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, Commissioners? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve as outlined in our staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Holtz?
Aye.
Sobolik?
Aye.
McGilkey?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Tasa?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Kunkelman?
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item 7, hearing on a plat requesting, or application requesting a plat of Kessler First Edition. Donald, please.
Yes, sir. Again, this property is another Kilbourne project. This is between First and Second Avenue, Robert Street and Broadway. Like the previous property, it's Zone DMU, downtown mixed use. There are a couple factors here. You might recognize these buildings here. This is, I believe, called the Stone Building. It's been many things over the last number of years. This is currently vacant here. This alley, you may recall from your April 2nd meeting, of course, where you recommended vacation of this alley through here. That is still in process due to some utility agreements that need to be negotiated. So that has not been completed. It is on its way to City Commission here this month, but that does not hold you back from recommending approval of this plat if you would wish to go forward with that. So the proposal here is to plat this property into 3 lots. Lot 1, 2, and then 3. The Stone Building will have its own lot. There's a building proposed to be built here, I believe, called the Kessler Building, another mixed-use building. Is that correct, Mr. Zimmerman? That'll fill up this area, and there'll be a little space between that and the Stone Building to allow some existing structure of that building to be accommodated. But again, pretty much going to fill up that lot, taking access off this alley here. So again, fairly straightforward, just replat of many existing lots that were platted, again, over 100 and some years ago. Mr. Mike Zimney of Kilbourne is here to answer any questions or may wish to address the commission. Other than that, staff's recommendation is stated in the staff report and shown on your screen. Thank you, commissioners.
Any questions for Donald, commissioners?
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is the alley to the east, is that right, of the Stone Building?
No, this is
just-
the Stone Building.
Yep.
This alley that they vacated is the one behind it.
Okay, that's the one that came to the planning commission?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
So which alley are we talking about then?
Well, that's the alley that we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
This one stays here, is that correct, Mr. Zimney? Yeah, this alley on the east side of the Stone Building stays there. That doesn't go anywhere. This is just an internal alley, and then there's a little space, there'll be a little space between the Stone Building and the future building here. That's what that sort of oddly configured.
Oh, so the west of the Stone Building then, there'll be a new building?
Yeah, it'll encompass this entire area, is that correct?
Oh, I see. So it goes from, that would be Second Avenue down to Third?
Second to
First to second.
First to second, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, I was just interested whether there were plans to vacate the alley to the west at some time for the redevelopment of kind of a walking, or to the east, sorry, walking alley there, like there is in the block further north.
Oh, the Roberts Alley?
Yeah.
Oh. Mr. Zimney can give you some information on that.
Thank you. Mike Zimney with Kilbourne Group. There'd be no plans to vacate the Roberts Alley, the alley to the east. It would stay as is. We'd still have plans, though, similar to the Roberts Commons project to the north, the Kessler project on this site here. There would be retail along the alley, similar to Roberts Commons. And then for reference, you've got Black Building and Scan Design and Halberstats and King House on the east side of that block.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's these here.
So that block actually has 2 alleys that will be usable.
Correct. Yep. On
however
the
you
west
do-
side, you have, just for reference, the Graver Alley, we kind of reference
Yeah.
that as, but that's the one Donald's pointing to right there. That's where the apartment building would have access, so there'd be underground parking and first floor parking, and then on First Avenue, Second Avenue, and Roberts Alley, there'd be retail.
So will there be access to that Graver Alley then for cars to get into the development?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
As long as Mike is up there. Any other questions for him while he's at the podium? Anybody? Okay, I will open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this project? Seeing none, I will close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act?
Mr. Chairman, I will move to approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 8. Application requesting a right-of-way vacation on a portion of 23rd Street South between lots 7 and 9, Burlington Northern I-29 South Industrial Center Edition.
Good afternoon. Item number 8 is called Burlington Northern I-29 South Industrial Center Edition, and it's located between 3240 and 3300 Main Avenue. This application is initiated by the City of Fargo, and it is a request for a vacation of the right-of-way for 33rd Street South due to its underutilization by the public and its lack of connectivity to other public right-of-ways. This portion of the street of 33rd Street South, it's not specific to any neighborhood plan, and it does not include any bicycle facilities or mixed-use trails. You can see here it just kind of dead ends. So staff finds that all criteria have been met, and we are recommending approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Maggie?
I just have one real quick one. So do you split the alley and then the adjacent property owners would get half that alley each, or how does that work?
So as of right now, it is surrounded by Crane Johnson and the Ameristeel properties, and the city's planning to obtain utility easements from both landowners for the entire width of the right-of-way. So the actual ownership. So
They'll each get half.
each
So
side
yes.
gets half.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will see the applicant's a city, they're here. Open to the public for comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this? Nobody's left. I close the public hearing. Any additional discussion? Are we ready to act? Mike,
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none? Roll call vote, please.
Tassa,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item E1, amendments to the 2019 action plan. Nicole.
Good evening. So we just have a couple items in front of you regarding to home funds. So home funds allow us to assign funds to projects specifically and out of the Housing and Urban Development Program. And so about a month ago, the city put out an announcement seeking interest in projects that might be focused on assisted senior housing projects, or assisted senior housing projects. And 2 properties came up. One, Craig Properties that you saw today at 3129 7th Avenue North. And then one that is in the third and final phase, it's the BSI Beyond Shelter project, Home Field 3 at 4225 28th Avenue South. What is required is a public notice process. So we put an ad in the paper and there's open public comment. This is scheduled for a City Commission final hearing on October 7th. But as part of the citizen participation plan, requires we bring any amendments to our action plan, our 2019 HUD action plan, to the Planning Commission. So that's why I'm in front of you today to allocate these 2 properties as our senior housing properties. So we will focus on working with these 2 property owners for the next year and a half. They both have 2020 construction schedules. And we're basically breaking our our total fund in half with $350,000 to 7th Avenue North property and $347,000 at the 28th Avenue South property. We're both very excited about these properties as we get the HUD money moving and assigned to properties. And basically that will require 20 years of monitoring and management. Both companies will be using professional management companies, and we have a really extensive management program, if you will, you can imagine, through HUD that takes us through a process to make sure that both property owners are ready to accept this money and go through that. As Jesse mentioned earlier today, there's layering of funds, so they're also getting money from the state, money from HUD directly, money from other financial pieces. But again, another way of doing assisted housing. So with that, we would just look for, we do need action, and so.
We'd be looking for a motion to approve the two budget items. Is there a motion to accept the two budget items?
I'd make that motion.
Is there a second? Scott? It's been moved in second. Do we need a roll call vote or a voice vote? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn so Mike can get to his mother's 91st birthday tonight.
She's actually 91 tomorrow.
Oh, 91 tomorrow, okay.
But I have a fantasy football draft tomorrow, so I told her she's got one day.
I see. So you told her she had to move it up. All right. Thank everybody for attending tonight, or this afternoon, not tonight yet.